Hello, welcome to Musicians Roundtable. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, and today we have as our guest composer and guitarist Pat Coldrick, one of Ireland's finest musicians, and in my view, the finest guitarist that I know of from the country right now. He has just released in the late last year in the fall an album that's doing tremendously called Ophelia, new CD. And so today we're going to talk together about the album, some of his composing and arranging processes, and so forth. So welcome, Pat. And how are you doing there?
Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on, and it's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Good. So one of the things that I think about, and I've been listening to your recording time and again here in Los Angeles, and I see a huge diversity on the recording of from solo guitar pieces to guitar with multiple instruments and all kinds of different realizations of tracks based on obviously what the potentials are in the original song. So, for example, the lead track and the name of the album itself is Ophelia. And could you give me an idea about how did that music start with you? Did you start playing on the guitar? Did you have some sounds in your mind? What was the seed of this composition?
Well, basically, the album Ophelia was inspired by a guitar that I constructed with a friend of mine who makes guitars, and he invited me to join him in constructing the guitar. And this happened a couple of years ago, and would have a good knowledge of woodwork, but not of guitar making. So we made this guitar, and the day that we completed the guitar was the day we had a huge storm hit the Irish shores. We don't get an awful lot of big storms here, but this was like kind of a hurricane, and they decided to put a name, as they do on hurricanes and typhoons, and they called the storm Ophelia. And it did quite a lot of damage, and it was quite a big storm. But the day that we completed the guitar build was the day that Ophelia was over the country. And we were there putting on the strings, and Dermot, the guy that made the guitar with me, Pat, what would we call the guitar? And I says, I have the perfect name. Let's call the guitar Ophelia. And then that was great. So the guitar was called Ophelia. And then days after, I was thinking, and I have been thinking since City Jam, which was out 4 years ago, I was thinking of doing another album with more of an Irish flavor to it, without it being too Irishy, diddly-idly, St. Patrick's Day kind of thing, but just with a kind of an Irish spirit in a contemporary kind of lyrical kind of a way. And I had some ideas for pieces in my head over the years, like short pieces, like, and I had this idea for Ophelia, the title track off the album, and we started with that piece, and I went in and I recorded basically the structure of the Ophelia title track, and we embellished it, and we worked in the studio with it, and then suddenly it was created. So that's really how the whole album came, the idea for the album. It came from originally the guitar, and then the name of the guitar inspired the name of the album, and then the name of the album inspired the title track Ophelia.
Wow. And so once you had composed the solo guitar part and you went into the studio and you were working with your producer, Peter Eads, am I pronouncing his name right?
Right.
Yes. So can you discuss how you recorded it? I know most recordings are done one track at a time, but sometimes there's groups there and so on. So can you give us an idea of the inside view of how you actually made this amazing track?
Yeah. In our case, we record one track at a time and we'd overdub. But basically, I would have the guitar part worked out. In fact, any of the pieces that are on any of my albums. I can play them all as an instrumental without any other instruments, but I do like to experiment and embellish the guitar using different instruments and modern instruments like synthesizers or strings, or using certain sounds that would be in these very, very up-to-date plugins that you have for production value effects. And I love that. I love having fun. It's like a painter with a huge palette of different colors. I think sometimes the guitar on its own, which is beautiful as well, and on the album there are just some solo pieces, but I love experimenting, introducing other instruments. And when we go to record these other instruments, we would overdub the guitar track, which is always recorded first, and then we would build on that. And in a very subtle way, we wouldn't just turn every piece into a huge big orchestral work. But you know, there's one piece I actually did on the album, City Jam, Las Abejas by Agustin Barrios. And in that track, we use a very subtle sound that's hardly even noticeable. And it's like a swarm of bees in the background. And it's just enough to make the piece a visual, like you're there, you can see them or you can feel them. And I love doing things like that. I love making the music visual by introducing little sounds as well. And I don't think it takes away from the music. I think it embellishes the music.
Yes, so in this one, the subtitle of Ophelia is The Great Storm. Were there any sounds that kind of evokes the idea of the storm?
Well, just listen to the chorus of Ophelia. And you can, you know, if you listen to the whole track, it starts off with a big crescendo or decrescendo of a cascade of strings coming down. And it's like, you can imagine, you can see the storm coming, it's building. And, you know, for about so many bars until it comes to the chorus, you can sense the tension, you can sense the storm getting closer and closer. And then when it does hit, where the chorus comes in, you're in the full wake of the storm. And then it's towards the end, then you can sense it quietens down again and the storm is passing over then. So it is, and there's a lot of instruments that kind of evoke, you can, for me, when I hear the piece, I can hear the winds, and I can see the waves and the winds blowing and the trees, the leaves, and but yeah, you know, it's like it's like painting pictures with music.
I know that this is true not only of Ophelia, but in many of the other tracks. Here I am in Los Angeles, moving about, and as I'm listening to them, I get a really strong feeling of being in a place in Ireland, a rural setting or something. There's a real feeling of place, and not just the visual place, but the kind of the emotion or the experience of being in a particular place. This comes through in a way that's really quite fascinating, and it's very evocative, and that's something that I think that people who connect to your music are going to be listening to these pieces again and again and again. I wanted.
Yeah, sorry, that's lovely to hear, because this is exactly what we tried to do for the overall album. We try to very subtly create a sense of Irishness in it, because if you listen to many Irish CDs, a lot of them are very kind of, you know, like traditional music, and you have accordions and you have bagpipes and stuff like that. I didn't want that exactly. I wanted something just more subtle and lyrical, and as you say, just a sense of Irishness. You know, you can even get the sense of the contemporary Irishness. If you listen to the piano, the Steinway piano in the track Ophelia, it's playing a line which is, the notes are quite contemporary, and it's just dancing around the top of the track. But the sound of it, to me, there's an Irish sound to it. The third track as well is another one of my own compositions, Passionelle. There's an air of Irishness in it. It's Irish lullaby, I call it. And it's creating the sense of Irishness in a different and probably a more contemporary way, I think, you know.
Oh yeah.
So I'm glad that you got that from the CD, because I mean, you would be very, very knowledgeable on music, and it's good to get feedback like that. So good.
For sure. Another track that continues to be really fascinating for me to listen to is the track that is titled Remembering Starlings, A Christmas Memory. And
Yeah.
can you give us share with us how did you start composing this? Where did what do you think the seeds were of this particular composition?
Well, every day I pick up the guitar. Um, I don't sit down and say, like, for the first 20 minutes, I'm going to play scales, and then the next half an hour, I'll play arpeggios. I just have fun, and the guitar always brings you down. When you pick up the guitar and you just kind of pick it up, every day is different. It will just bring you on a different journey. And sometimes that journey will introduce you to maybe a couple of notes here or there, or a couple of chords that sound nice, and then you it's you get the bases of you can hear a tune in it somewhere. There's something in it, It doesn't happen every day. It just comes, and then there's times, and very late at night, if I pick up the guitar, um, I find that melodies come to me. I hear things, notes in my head and melodies, and it might only be about 4 bars of something, but there's enough there to build on. And with the likes of Starlings, um, I was having fun on the guitar playing the chord of G major, which is a lovely sounding chord, and I just experimented and had a fun. I did a few progressions, and all of a sudden it came, and it was really a fun piece. And every time I play it, I smile because the whole spirit about remembering Starlings um, is to evoke feelings of feelings of feeling good and good vibes and sunny days. And the, I find the key of G is a happy key. So that's really how it came. And it's a very simple piece. There's only a half dozen chords in it, but it's a very, very popular piece. Um, but and again, the inspiration came as well for the piece. I met a friend of mine that I used to play music with many, many years ago, and I hadn't seen him for about 30 years. And we met one day for coffee. And when we were about 18 or 19, we used to play music together, and they were great days growing up. It's a great time of your life. And we reminisced for about 3 or 4 hours on all the stories and the things that we used to get up to. And we laughed the whole day. And the remembering Starlings line, it's a long story, I suppose, but it was something that I said back then, which was a very kind of a funny thing. But I called it Remembering Starlings because it was a funny moment in my life when I was 18 or 19. And every time I think about it, I smile and I laugh. And that's why I call the piece Remembering Starlings. But it really is all about the great time of anyone's life when they're 18 or 19 years of age. Those years in particular, I think, is the best time of your life. So life is fun. So it's that's how the piece came about.
Wonderful. So one of the pieces, and you've told me this a little bit about the story, but it's an absolutely fascinating story called the piece called "The Jumping Church," which is Peter Eads' music, I believe. And so, can you tell us about the story behind the Jumping Church, because it is pretty amazing.
Where I live in Dublin, about 30 kilometers from Dublin, there's a small little village called Ardee. And outside Ardee, there's an old monument or old church. It's about 1,000 years old. And it's a very interesting place because it's called the Jumping Church. Because there's a gable wall of the church. I mean, most of it's ruined now, but the gable wall is still intact. And it's lying at an angle, more so even than the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And the wall is about 2 or 3 foot thick. So it defies gravity and physics how this wall is standing. If you wanted to Google the Jumping Church, Ireland, you can read all about this place. But the story and the legend goes that if you look at the actual foundations of the actual gable wall, there's a gap of about 3 feet from the original foundations of the gable wall and where the wall is now. And the legend goes that there was someone buried way back in the day who seemingly was excommunicated from the church and he was buried within the confines of the church. But this created absolute consternation at the time. No way. I think he might have been a Protestant and it was a Catholic church or vice versa. I can't remember. But the legend goes that the wall jumped over his burial place and left him outside the confines of the church. And you can see the old grave, and you can see where the wall jumped off its foundation over his coffin and landed at nearly a 40-degree angle to the ground. It's the most fascinating. But I remember telling Peter Eads and telling many people about this old monument. And even in Ireland, some people don't even know about it. And Peter never heard about it. And he thought it was the funniest and most fascinating story he ever heard. And he decided to write a piece of music about it, which he did. And that's why it's now called the Jumping Church. But it does feature some very interesting and very well-known musicians in Ireland. One gentleman by the name of Finbar Fury, who would be world-renowned as a piper and whistler from I'm sure a lot of your American colleagues would have heard of Finbar Fury, and he is actually playing uilleann pipes in one of the choruses on the Jumping Church. It's a very fun piece. The guitar, again, is just part of the overall soundscape of the piece. It's full of energy, full of fun, and it's very, very Irish. And that's how the Jumping Church was born.
Well, everything that you say about its the sense of the piece is that it's just a blast. It's just an absolutely delightful piece of music, and all the musicians are having a great time, and it's really, really something that, for me, it's one of the more special tracks you've done.
Yeah, that's quite correct, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah, great.
I was also going to ask you about the track Farewell, which is actually the last and 11th track on the CD. And could you say a few words about how that piece, how you made or composed that piece and so forth?
Again, it was a melody like most melodies come to me. It was probably like the lament that I wrote many years ago. It just came from out of midair in the middle of the night. I just could hear this melody in my head, and the whole spirit of this piece is it's about, sometimes we have to say goodbye to some people, sometimes our friends, and they might leave, or a member of the family might go abroad, and you might see them again for years. You might never see them again. So it's like it's saying goodbye to someone that will be close to you. But if you listen to the very end of the piece, it goes it's in E minor, and it goes to E major for about 4 bars. And from the minor to the major is enough to make you realize that don't worry, that you will see this person again. And you'll remember them with fondness and look forward to the day where you see them again. And I just thought it was a fitting piece to finish the album.
Yes, it works beautifully. And the that compositional structure of being in a minor key and moving to the parallel major, like E minor to E major, is something that has a wonderful effect on the listener, I think, and it feels uplifting. It feels like there's feelings of optimism and peacefulness and everything, and it does come through. And sometimes the major key just has to make an appearance, which it does in this piece as well.
Yeah.
Well,
good. Yeah. That's
so,
precisely it.
Pat, this is a great introduction and discussion of your CD, and I want to thank you for joining Musicians Roundtable and sharing what you have about the history, how you recorded it and composed these things. I think there'll be a lot of interest in what you've been saying, and highly recommended. It's absolutely a wonderful CD that I think will appeal to a broad range of people, and
Good.
it's really such a fine accomplishment from as a composer, and also just the whole concept of it, I think, is very appealing.
That's a good point, actually, because one of my goals as well with this CD was to make it user friendly, that it would appeal to a wider audience. You know, it is a classical guitar CD. It is a guitar CD. It's basically guitar music, but with wide appeal. Like, judging by the people who have bought it so far, come from all walks of life, just ordinary people who just like music, not necessarily guitar, but just like the sound of those pieces, like exactly what you said. And again, that's great, because again, that was my intention with this particular CD, that it would have mass appeal across the board. So it's ticked those boxes, and it really is doing very, very well over here at the moment in Ireland. It's getting lots of national airplay. I've been invited in May to play with the RTE Concert Orchestra as well, the music from Ophelia, which again is a wonderful honour in our National Concert Hall. And a lot of good things have come from Ophelia, and it's elevated my status as a musician in Ireland as well. And it's great it's also great for the guitar in Ireland, because the classical guitar in Ireland, it wouldn't have a huge following, and there wouldn't be very many players playing that particular instrument, but it has really elevated the instrument, and it certainly has have an awful lot more fans than it used to. So it's all good. So I'm I'm more pleased, not just for me, but I'm just pleased with the instrument, that it's reaching out to more people because of the kind of music and my style of playing, and that's I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. Well, so listen, Pat, again, thank you. And I know we'll connect again before too long. And please have a great May concert. I wish I could be there. I'm just a little bit far from Dublin at the moment. But if I have a chance to hop over, we'd love to come by and see you play. That would be something special.
You just want to come over to get more Guinness, I know.
That's my special subversive idea. That would be something included in the travel itinerary. The Temple Bar in Dublin is a memorable place, and
yeah. Well,
and,
you know, you're very welcome. You're always very welcome over here, and we'll have a great time the next time you're over.
Absolutely.
And we'll go and we'll visit the jumping church.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Lovely.
You'll enjoy it.
Okay. So again, thanks, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Bye.